Have you ever felt your heart stop in an instant, as if the world around you froze and you were stuck, unable to move or speak? That's exactly how I felt when I looked down at my phone and saw Ethan's name flashing across the screen. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. What could it be this time? A casual check-in, a quick, "I miss you" from across the miles? But nothing could have prepared me for what I heard when I stepped out into the hallway to take the call. His voice came through cold, almost smug. "Violet, I'm divorcing you," Ethan said, his tone casual, like he was telling me about a sale he made at work. "I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that." My breath caught in my chest, the words sinking in slower than I could process. Sold the apartment? The place we built together? The home I had poured so much of myself into? The audacity of it all hit me like a slap to the face, but I couldn't let him see my shock. I didn't give him the satisfaction. "Sold it?" I managed to say, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. "You think you can just do that?" "Yeah," he answered, his laugh dry and full of finality. "Nicole and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway." Nicole. The name stung, even though I'd suspected it for months. Tyler's late nights, his sudden work trips, the emotional distance, each small crack had whispered of her. But hearing him say it so easily, as if I were the intruder in their lives, lit a fire in my chest. I should have been angry, but instead I felt a strange calm, almost like I was watching this betrayal from outside my body. "Sounds good," I replied, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. There was no way I was going to let him see me crack. Not now, not ever. I don't know what I expected when I hung up the phone. Maybe for the world to come crashing down around me, or maybe for me to collapse into a pile of tears and disbelief. But that didn't happen. I stood there, in the hallway of a hotel I didn't recognize, staring at my phone, my hand trembling just enough to make me notice. The tears didn't come, but the anger, the betrayal, they were there. They settled like a thick fog in my chest, suffocating every inch of calm I had left. I thought about everything, our 6 years together, the life we'd built. I'd trusted him. I had put my faith into this marriage, into us. We'd bought that apartment together. It wasn't just a place to live, it was the symbol of everything we had achieved. At least, that's what I thought. But I had missed something, hadn't I? His dismissiveness when I asked about finances, his charming smile whenever I questioned him. I had always believed in his confidence. Now I saw it for what it was, his ability to manipulate me into believing I didn't need to know the details. And how had I not seen it? How had I not realized that every time I was uncertain, he was getting away with everything? The day passed in a blur of client meetings, nodding and agreeing, and pretending to care while my mind raced. Ethan thought he had won, that he had already secured the apartment, taken everything we had built, and left me scrambling. But he was wrong. There was one detail he had missed: the apartment deed. I remembered that one quiet moment months ago when we refinanced. Ethan had signed the papers without a second thought, too focused on the lower interest rate to notice the fine print. I had transferred the deed into my name. I didn't make a big deal of it at the time. I just knew it would give me more control down the line. Ethan never cared enough to ask about the details. Now, I was about to turn that oversight into my weapon. For the first time since that phone call, I felt a sense of control. It wasn't about revenge. It was about taking back what was mine. Ethan thought he could outsmart me. He thought he could strip away everything I held dear, sell our home without even asking for my permission, and walk away scot-free. But he didn't know who he was dealing with. As I thought about it, a sense of resolve washed over me. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry or let him see me broken. This wasn't just about losing my husband. This was about reclaiming myself. And I would start with that apartment. No one was taking it from me, not him, not her, and certainly not the man I thought I knew. It was time to fight back. I didn't waste any time. As soon as I had the clarity I needed, I picked up the phone and dialed Chloe, my lawyer, and one of my oldest friends. She'd been by my side through thick and thin, always the steady hand when things seemed too complicated. When she picked up, I didn't need to say much. "Violet." Chloe's voice was instantly familiar, reassuring in the face of everything. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself before launching into the details. I told her everything: Tyler's call, the apartment, the legal mess, and ended with a bitter chuckle. And now he thinks he can just walk away with everything. Chloe didn't respond right away, but I could hear the shock in her silence. After a moment, she spoke, her voice a mix of disbelief and determination. "Violet, does he even realize that he can't just sell something that doesn't belong to him? The deed is in your name, right?" I felt a surge of relief wash over me, hearing her say what I already knew. "Yeah, it's all in my name. He never bothered to read the fine print." She laughed darkly, but it was the kind of laugh that you give when someone has made a huge mistake. "Well, looks like Ethan's arrogance is going to be his undoing. You have legal grounds to stop that sale. This is a fraud, Violet. He's crossed a line, and I'm going to help you make sure he pays for it." I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders, just a little. Chloe knew what she was doing. "So what's the next step?" "We'll notify the buyer immediately and inform them that the sale is invalid. After that, we draft a letter for Ethan, outlining everything. We hit him where it hurts, his pride, and if he tries to make any more moves, we take him to court." Her words were firm and practical. This wasn't about fighting dirty, it was about following the law and making Ethan see the consequences of his actions. For the first time in a long while, I felt in control. He thought he'd won, but he didn't even know what was coming. The next few days passed in a blur. I was on autopilot, carrying out my work duties while my mind stayed focused on what lay ahead. Every interaction at the office was a mask, the cool professionalism I had perfected years ago. But underneath it all, I was scheming. I was planning. I spent hours at night researching everything I could about real estate law, fraud, and divorce proceedings. I wasn't going to let Ethan slip away unscathed. I wasn't going to be a passive victim in this. The more I read, the more I realized that Tyler had underestimated me, something I'd been doing for years. He thought I was naive, that I didn't notice the cracks in our marriage, the things he thought he could get away with. But I had been paying attention all along. I just hadn't been in a hurry to make a move. Now, though, I was ready. I called Chloe again, keeping her updated on my progress. She reassured me that everything was moving smoothly on her end. The buyer had been shocked but was cooperating, and all the necessary paperwork would be drafted soon. Meanwhile, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find: emails, bank statements, everything that tied Tyler to the apartment. I had every intention of using it all. It didn't take long for the first wave of action to begin. The letter from Chloe went out to Ethan's email, explaining in no uncertain terms that the apartment sale was invalid, and that he could face charges for fraud if he didn't return the money. I read the letter several times, savoring every word, every reminder of his mistake. The satisfaction was fleeting, though. Tyler hadn't responded yet, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he exploded. The waiting was nerve-wracking. My stomach was in knots every time I checked my email, half expecting some angry rant from him or a desperate plea to talk things over. But nothing came. I wanted to think that maybe he was already starting to understand the gravity of the situation, but part of me knew better. He was too proud, too smug to admit he had made a misstep. He didn't think I would fight back. He thought he could walk away from this with everything and leave me to pick up the pieces. But he was wrong. When I finally sat back, allowing myself a moment to breathe, I realized something important. This wasn't just about the apartment or the money. This was about me, about taking back what I had let slip away for too long. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to be a doormat anymore. Tyler had underestimated me, and now he was going to learn exactly who he was dealing with. The next few days would test my patience, but I was ready. Ethan had made his move, and now it was my turn. It had been days since I last spoke to Ethan. My mind was consumed by thoughts of the apartment, the future, and the wreckage of our marriage. When I finally boarded the plane home, the weight of the past few days settled onto my shoulders. I wasn't sure what to expect when I walked back into that apartment, but I knew one thing. things had changed. As I stepped into the apartment, the silence was almost suffocating. The once warm, shared space now felt foreign, like a place I didn't belong. Tyler's things were still scattered around, his jackets draped carelessly over the armchair, his shoes tossed by the door, the remnants of the life we had built together. It was as if he hadn't fully left yet, or maybe he thought that just his things alone would make me believe that everything was still the same. I set my suitcase down with a quiet thud, my eyes scanning the room. It felt empty, but not in the way you'd expect from a home that was now abandoned. No, this emptiness was different. This was the kind of quiet that told me this was no longer our home. It was mine now, and I was about to take the first step in making sure Ethan understood that. I knew he would be here soon. I wasn't ready for the confrontation, but I was ready to face it. I was ready to face him and whatever he had to say. It was time to settle this once and for all. Sure enough, that evening, Ethan stormed through the door. He was livid, his face red with anger, and his phone clutched tightly in his hand. He didn't even spare a glance at me as he slammed the door behind him. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, waving the letter Chloe had sent. His eyes were wide, filled with confusion and rage. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine." I could feel my pulse quicken, but I didn't let him see it. I stood still, crossing my arms in front of me, and held his gaze. "No, Tyler," I said calmly and deliberately. "It's not half yours. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own." He froze, his eyes narrowing as if he was processing the words but couldn't quite comprehend them. His jaw was clenched, and for a moment he looked completely lost. "What are you talking about?" he spat, his voice rising. "We both bought this place together. You're just trying to pull some legal crap to screw me over." "No, Tyler," I said, my voice unwavering. "You signed the paperwork after we refinanced. You didn't read it, just like you never bothered to ask me about anything. I transferred the deed into my name months ago." I held up the document, the deed I had carefully kept with me. "You signed it. Don't pretend you didn't." His face twisted into something that almost looked like disbelief, then pure frustration. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" he sneered, taking a step toward me. "You think this changes anything? You're still going to look like a fool when it all falls apart." I didn't flinch. "The sale is already void, Tyler. The buyer knows it's illegal. You've already made your move and it's backfiring." His chest heaved with barely contained fury. "You can't just kick me out of here. This is my home too." I tilted my head, looking at him coolly. "No, Tyler, this is my home. You can stay for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear, I'm not going anywhere." He stood there, trembling with rage, searching for something to say, some way to take control again. But he knew, deep down, that I was in control now. Over the next few days, I watched as Tyler's arrogance slowly crumbled. At first, he tried to bargain. He left me countless frantic voicemails, his words alternating between desperate pleas and thinly veiled threats. "Violet, please, just talk to me. I don't want this to be the way it ends. We can work it out." His voice cracked with guilt at times, at other times dripping with entitlement. He even tried calling me, begging for another chance, his words faltering as he heard the indifference in my voice. But I didn't respond. I couldn't afford to. If I let him back in, even just a little, it would undo everything I had worked for in the past few days. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again, not after everything. The voicemail messages kept coming, each more pathetic than the last. "You're going to ruin me, Violet. Please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Can we just talk about this?" The desperation in his voice was something I had never heard before. It felt almost satisfying, almost like he was finally feeling the weight of what he'd done to me. But still, I didn't reply. Chloe was working behind the scenes, making sure every legal detail was in order. The buyer had rescinded the sale, furious at Ethan for trying to sell them something that didn't belong to him. I could practically hear the satisfaction in Chloe's voice when she told me, "He has no leverage left, Violet. We've got him cornered. If he's smart, he'll sign those divorce papers quickly. The sooner he does, the sooner you both move on. It was hard to believe it was all coming together. After months of feeling powerless, I was finally on the verge of winning. It wasn't just about the apartment or the money anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. I had allowed myself to be manipulated for too long, but not anymore. When the day came for the final confrontation, when Ethan walked in looking like a man who had finally realized the depth of his mistakes, I was ready. The battle wasn't over yet, but it would be soon. A few days later, Chloe called me with an update. Her voice was brisk and professional, but I could sense the undercurrent of satisfaction. "Violet, the buyer is on our side. They've agreed to back us up, which makes our case stronger. They're furious about being scammed by Ethan. They're ready to help with whatever we need, including taking legal action if he doesn't return the money." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the news. The sense of victory was beginning to sink in, though it still felt surreal. Ethan had tried to play me for a fool, but it was clear now that he was the one in trouble. "So, what's next?" I asked, my voice steady. "Next, we send Ethan a formal notice that the sale is void," Chloe explained. "We'll also outline the fraud charges he could face. If he's smart, he'll realize that he's already crossed a line he can't cross. But if he's as arrogant as he's been, we'll be ready to go to court." I could hear her typing on her keyboard, preparing the legal documents, but the words that stuck with me were fraud charges. The thought of Ethan being held accountable for what he had done, his casual theft of my home, his betrayal of our marriage, sent a small jolt of satisfaction through me. The man who had thought he could walk all over me was about to learn the hard way that there were consequences for his actions. I hung up the phone and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Things were happening. The legal battle was on its way, and I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. But there was still one thing left to do: get Ethan out of my life completely. With the legal wheels turning, I started the process of reclaiming the apartment. I wasn't just removing Ethan's belongings, I was making the space my own again. The apartment had been a symbol of our life together, but now it felt like an anchor, tethering me to the past. Every jacket, every shoe, every stray possession of his was a reminder of the years I had wasted, of the ways he had controlled me. Lauren came over one evening to help me pack up the last of his things. She was a great friend, practical, down to earth, and always there when I needed her. She took one look at the pile of Ethan's stuff on the living room floor and raised an eyebrow. "How's he taking all this?" she asked, tossing a few of his ties into the box with a little too much enthusiasm. I laughed despite myself. "Not well. He's still convinced he can talk his way out of it, but I'm not budging." "Good," Lauren said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or your time." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much of my emotional energy I had been giving to him, how much space he had taken up in my life, even when he wasn't physically present. Now, as I watched Lauren carefully pack up his things, I felt the weight begin to lift. Every box I filled was another step toward freedom. When we finished, the apartment felt emptier, but it was a good emptiness. The air felt lighter and cleaner. It was as if the space had been reclaimed, not just physically, but emotionally. I could almost breathe again. Over the next few days, the phone calls from Ethan grew more frequent. His messages had gone from angry threats to desperate pleas, and now they were full of guilt. "Violet, please, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you. Can we at least talk?" The first few times, I deleted the messages without listening. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't going to listen to him beg, not after everything he'd done. But then the messages started to get more intense. "You're going to ruin me, Violet. Please. I'll lose everything. Don't do this." The guilt-tripping was classic Ethan. He always thought he could manipulate me, make me feel sorry for him, and make me doubt myself. But this time, I wasn't buying it. This time, I had the upper hand. I had everything I needed to make sure he faced the consequences, and I wasn't going to let him talk his way out of it. I didn't reply to him, not once. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I focused on my next step, finalizing the legal process. Chloe was working tirelessly behind the scenes, making sure every document was in place and every legal detail covered. The divorce papers were in the works. Ethan had no leverage. He had no room to manipulate me anymore. I could feel the walls closing in on him, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about taking back my life, my freedom. I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of satisfaction every time I imagined Ethan listening to my voicemail messages, his desperation in full swing. I wasn't his to control anymore. I knew the confrontation was inevitable, but even with everything I had prepared, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know exactly when it would happen, whether it would be in the middle of a heated argument or after a quiet moment when we both let our guard down. But when I heard the door open, I felt the shift in the air. I turned from where I was sitting at the kitchen table, paperwork scattered in front of me, and saw Ethan standing in the doorway. But there was someone else with him. Sophia, his new partner, the woman who had torn apart the life I thought I had, the woman who had been the reason behind Ethan's late nights, his distance, and his sudden disappearances. I wasn't sure if I should feel anger or pity when I looked at her, maybe both. She stepped into the apartment as if she owned it, looking around with a smug smile, her arm wrapped possessively around Ethan's. "So this is where we'll be staying?" she asked, her voice dripping with entitlement. For a moment, I just stared at her. How dare she waltz in here, as if she belonged in the space I had fought for, the space I had built with my own hands, my sacrifice. I was done pretending to be the victim. "No," I said, my voice firm. "This is where Tyler was staying, but you won't be staying here at all." Sophia's smile faltered, confusion briefly flashing across her face before she caught herself. Ethan's expression was a mix of disbelief and anger. He stepped forward, trying to assert some form of control, but I didn't let him. This was my moment. "What the hell do you mean?" he demanded. "You can't just throw me out. This is still my apartment." I straightened, crossing my arms in front of me, my gaze steady. "No, Tyler, this is my apartment. The deed has been in my name for months, and you—" I turned to Sophia. "You have no right to be here either." Sophia's face reddened as the reality of what I was saying sank in. She looked at Ethan, seeking some sort of explanation, but his face was drawn tight with frustration. He was floundering like a man who had finally realized the gravity of the mess he'd made, but it was too late for him to fix it now. "What is this?" Sophia asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You told me this place was yours. You said we could move in here." Ethan looked away from her, his eyes darting toward the ground as if he was trying to avoid the confrontation. "It's complicated," he muttered, but his voice lacked the confidence it once had. I didn't let him off the hook. "Oh, it's not complicated. You tried to sell an apartment that didn't belong to you, and now I'm telling you that you can't just waltz in here and pretend like nothing's happened." I glanced back at Sophia, her eyes wide with confusion. "This isn't your home. You've been lied to, and now both of you are going to pay for it." Ethan's frustration turned into desperation. "You can't do this, Violet," he shouted. "You think you can just take everything from me?" I took a step toward him, my voice steady and resolute. "You've already taken everything from me, Tyler. But not anymore. I'm not your doormat. I'm not the one who's going to let you walk all over me." Sophia's composure started to crack, and for the first time since she'd entered the apartment, I saw the faintest glimpse of doubt in her eyes. Ethan's attempt to salvage the situation was falling apart. As the weight of the confrontation sank in, Ethan's arrogance slowly shifted into something else, something more vulnerable. His usual bravado cracked, and I saw a glimpse of the man who was now desperate, begging for something he had no right to ask for. "Violet, please," he said, his voice softer now, his pride slipping away. "I screwed up. I know that. But you don't have to do this. We don't have to end like this." I could feel the contempt building in my chest. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, cutting him off. "You made your choice, Tyler. You chose her. You chose to sell what wasn't yours. You chose to betray me, to throw everything away. And now you want me to feel sorry for you?" He reached out, a hand trembling, as if to touch me, but I stepped back, putting space between us. "This doesn't change anything. Not now, not ever. You've hurt me in ways I can't even put into words. But I'm done with you. I'm done playing your games. This—" I gestured to the apartment around us. isn't your life anymore. This is mine, and you need to leave. His eyes flashed with rage again, but underneath it, I saw something else. Fear. The kind of fear that comes when you realize you've lost control. I've already signed the divorce papers, I continued, pulling the paperwork out from my bag and slamming it onto the table. It's over, Tyler, and if you don't leave, I'll make sure you never get a chance to come back. His eyes darted between me and the papers, the weight of what I was saying finally sinking in. For a moment, there was no response. Then, quietly, almost defeated, he muttered, "Fine, I'll go." I stood there, watching him as he grabbed his things, moving slowly as if he couldn't believe it was happening. The door slammed shut behind him, and I stood there for a moment, taking in the silence that followed. The emptiness of the apartment had a different feeling now. The weight I'd been carrying for so long, the emotional burden of a failed marriage, was finally lifting. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the bitterness. I had fought for this moment, for the strength to stand up for myself, for the clarity to recognize what I had been through, and for the courage to walk away from a man who had tried to take everything from me. But even now, as the door closed behind him, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt like I had won something much bigger than just the apartment. I had won my life back. For the first time, I wasn't a passive participant in my own story. I wasn't waiting for someone else to make decisions for me. I was the one calling the shots. As I locked the door behind me, the finality of it all settled in. This was my home now, and no one, not even Ethan, was ever going to take it away from me again. It felt almost surreal walking around the apartment after Tyler left. For days, it had felt like a prison, filled with reminders of a life that wasn't mine anymore. But now, the space was mine, empty of his things, his influence, his presence. I moved through each room, touching the furniture and rearranging small details that had once been his, and now felt like pieces of my own story. I picked up the last of his things, his books, his DVDs, his jacket that still hung over the back of the chair, and placed them in a box near the door. Each object was another small victory, another step in erasing the past and making room for something new. The apartment felt lighter. It was strange, almost like I could feel the energy of the space shift as I moved through it. The rooms were quieter, but not in the suffocating way they had been when he was still here. It was a peaceful quiet now, one where I could think clearly without the weight of his expectations, his anger, his disappointment pressing down on me. I spent hours rearranging the furniture, placing my favorite books on the shelves, and hanging the artwork I had always loved but never dared to put up before. As I did, I thought about how far I had come. A year ago, I wouldn't have dreamed of standing here, owning my choices, owning my space. But now, I was living proof of how much I had grown. Chloe called later that evening with an update on the legal proceedings. "He signed the divorce papers, Violet," she said, her tone both professional and relieved. "It's official. You're free." I stood still for a moment, letting her words sink in. Free. It was such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. For the first time, I realized how trapped I had been. Trapped in a marriage that no longer worked. Trapped in my fears and insecurities. Trapped by the image of what I thought my life was supposed to be. But now, I wasn't trapped anymore. "I can't believe it," I whispered, a small laugh escaping me. "It's over." "Of course it is," Chloe said, as if it had been inevitable all along. "You fought for this. You've earned it." I smiled, looking around at the apartment that was now mine, feeling the deep satisfaction that came with knowing I had taken control. This wasn't just about the house or the legal battle. This was about the life I was building. Later that evening, Lauren came over with takeout, a bottle of wine, and a huge smile on her face. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a glass of wine and took a seat on the couch beside me. We clinked our glasses together, the sound of it crisp and final. "Here's to fresh starts," Lauren said, a wide grin on her face, "and well-deserved victories." I laughed softly, the weight of the past few weeks finally starting to lift. "To freedom," I said, my voice steady. The word felt so different now. More than just a goal, it was a reality. I was free. We talked for hours, reminiscing about the old days, laughing about the ridiculous things I had put up with in my marriage, and discussing everything that was to come. Lauren had always been the kind of friend who could make me laugh in even the darkest moments, and tonight was no different. As we finished our wine and settled into the quiet comfort of the evening, I realized something important. This wasn't just a celebration of what I had been through, it was a celebration of who I was becoming. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that apartment months ago. I wasn't the same woman who had cried in my car after finding out about Nicole. I had fought for myself, and I was stronger than I had ever been. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling of everything I had once believed about myself. As the divorce was finalized and my life began to stabilize, I started thinking about what was next. The apartment had already started to feel like home, but I knew this wasn't where I was going to stay forever. There would be a new chapter, a new place, somewhere that would be mine in every way. But for now, I was content. I had reclaimed my space, and more importantly, I had reclaimed my peace. The weight of the past no longer held me down. Tyler's name didn't linger in the corners of the apartment anymore. His lies, his manipulations were just that, memories. They no longer defined me. One evening, after finishing a long day at work, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. For the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had gotten through the hardest part of my life, and now I was free to move forward. Tyler had thought he could break me. He had laughed at the idea of me being left with nothing. But what he didn't understand, what he could never understand, was that I wasn't defined by the things we had built together. I wasn't defined by his betrayal or his arrogance. I was defined by my strength, my resilience, and the choices I made moving forward. And so, as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, I thought about everything that had brought me to this point. The pain, the heartache, the betrayal. And I realized that I had come out of it stronger, wiser, and more certain of who I was. I had reclaimed my life. And nothing, not even Tyler, could ever take that away from me again. The next chapter of my life was just beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Through everything that happened, I learned one crucial lesson. I am enough. For so long, I let my worth be tied to someone else's approval, to a life that wasn't truly mine. But I've realized now that my value isn't defined by a marriage, by the approval of others, or by a house. It's defined by how I choose to live, the strength to stand up for myself, and the courage to let go when something isn't right. I've learned that no one can take away my power unless I let them. And I'll never let that happen again.